Women in Business helped its members secure 2.25 million. I'm gonna say it slow. 2.25 million in contracts in 1 year. We are so proud. Last week that number was 1.25 million, and then we got notified of another $1 million contract. So when I tell you we do this for real, okay? So lean in and get all this goodness. With that said, let me jump in with why Dawn Nicole, as the founder, cares so much about this topic. So corporate is my jam. I'm gonna say it slow, right? We teach 3 different sectors at Queen City Women in Business. We help women compete in the federal sector, which you will hear all about on day 3 on Friday. We help women compete in the local and state sector, which I absolutely am a fan of. I just submitted a multi-million-dollar contract for the local and state here. And we help women compete in corporate. And it is possible, but you have to know the game, ladies. You have to know the lingo. You have to know how to translate what it is you're used to saying as a small business to a line item that they actually procure. So some of it is that we don't know the lingo, right? So we're going to learn those things today. Why am I the right one to go ahead and jump in and share this with you? From the corporate side, I do corporate all day, every day with the contracts. Before I was trying to, so in 2015, I started my own company. A lot of you may not know this about me, but I started my own coaching and consulting company, accredited training company, leadership, all the things, right? And I was winning contracts kind of off the side. So when I say off the side, ladies, these might have been $10,000, $15,000 here. But at the time, I didn't think that there was anything special about it, right? Atrium Health needed someone to do a retreat. Anderson Windows flew us out, CIAA, yada, yada, yada. And I didn't realize then that this was actually a strategy. And I certainly didn't know then, ladies, that there was a whole path for contracting under the supplier diversity bucket. Had no idea. I was just out hustling, doing my thing. However, once I started to secure these contracts and really understand that corporations was a play that all of us should be looking at, I realized that this was one of the motivating factors with why we started Queen City Women in Business, okay? So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start the first of its kind platform and full-scale community, because of women just like us, like you. I started running into more and more women who were interested, eligible, and even certified in some cases to do business. But ladies, they still didn't have access. They still didn't know the lingo. They still didn't know how to price, which is still a big problem today. All right. I see people trying to come in. So co-host, please make sure you're letting people in. But I see people who don't know how to price, or they're just not sure. So this series over the next 3 days is going to help us lean in and understand. With that said, the first thing I want to say is when it comes to corporate contracting and RFPs, there are really 2 paths. And if I haven't been clear, this whole series this week is being sponsored by the Supplier Readiness Training Program. So if you look to your top left corner right there, I would take a picture of that. You don't have to do anything now, but do capture it. The Supplier Readiness Training Program, ladies, is a 5-hour online on demand that packs everything we're going to teach over these 3 days. You get it on demand as a training course. Okay. So make sure that if you don't get everything answered in this series, everything you need, you can always go back and enroll in the Supplier Readiness Training Program. So it is the sponsor of today's series in this week's series. With that said, let's go back to corporate contracting. Did you know there are 2 types of corporate contracts that you need to be aware of? One type, ladies, is going to be the traditional RFP that we hear all about. This is a process where a corporation goes through a solicitation process. So a solicitation is activated and sent out through multiple channels. We'll talk about those channels in just a second. And the goal of that solicitation process, it's very formal, and it's where corporations are looking for something specific. They're looking for the right vendor or sources sought to fill the role. This is very traditional, and this is what a lot of people reference. But here's what a lot of people don't know. Most corporate contracts come through a non-traditional path. Did you know that? A non-traditional path, ladies, is all relationship driven. They don't care anything about an RFP. There are so many women, and I'm one of them, who got really high figure contracts that never went through a solicitation because in corporate, they don't have to. Unlike government, Government has to show equitable and they have to meet all these mandates. And there's a strong amount of advisory and oversight, both at the federal level and at the local and state. But in corporations, I want you to come here with me mentally. These are individual managers in some cases, procurement managers who are hiring for a technology resource, right? Or hiring for a person or hiring for an event. And they could care less about going through an RFP process. They're going to go with their favorite buddy or who they know. Okay. So we're going to talk about both of these paths today. So you're in luck. I'm going to share with you the gold on how to understand both. All right. The other thing I want to say before we jump in, it's imperative that you all understand the lingo. So I want you to take a picture of this slide. I'm not going to touch on, there's too many things. These are 17 key terms that you absolutely need to know if you're going to be doing business in corporate. So I'm going to give everyone a chance to take a picture. Again, this is being sponsored by the Supplier Readiness Training Program, where you can get all this learning on demand by yourself. So please take a picture and then we're going to move on. If you took a picture, say me. Come off mute and say me. I'm ready. Let's go. I need to hear. Awesome. Y'all are the best. Y'all, because I can't.
Me.
Okay, I know that's right. Me. Okay.
Me.
All right. So now that you took this picture and you can reference it later, today I'm going to focus on the top 7 terms so that as I tell my personal story and you all can ask questions, you're with me, you're following because you understand the lingo, which is so important. Do not underestimate the lingo of this world. Okay. So let's talk about it. So first of all, Dawn Nicole, I hear everybody talking about an RFP. How is an RFP different from an RFQ, RFI, and what comes first? People rarely talk about it, so let's do it. An RFP is just like what it sounds. It's a request for a proposal, and it's a formal document, ladies, issued by the organization seeking proposals. Normally, this is the final step. So what most people don't know is typically an RFI comes first, then an RFQ, then an RFP. Did you know that? So it's very typical that a corporation will say, I kind of like Tania's artwork. We're restructuring, we're remodeling the other wing of the building. We need some artwork, but we're not ready to buy. We're not quite ready for a quote, but I just want to know how Tania's company works, okay? So let me put all 3 here so you all can quickly identify the difference. The RFI is normally the first step when they're trying to be formal, and this is a document sent to potential vendors like us, like you, to gather simple information about the capabilities and solutions. A rookie mistake is if you put pricing when they're only after information. Be careful. If it is an RFI, they just want information. Ladies, you know that we teach you to have your capability statement ready. So what you could do is respond to the RFI document and include your capability statement as a supporting doc. If it makes sense, say yes. I need to hear somebody say yes so I can keep going.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Now let's talk about the RFQ. So I'm going to pretend I'm the hiring manager at big corporate. And I love what Tania sent me. Tania sent me a whole bunch of information about her art portfolio, things that should go in your RFI. It's not only your capabilities, but how are you different? What's your differentiator? Because I'm having this conversation with 15 other people. Make it make sense, Tania. Make it stand out. Make it pop. Are you woman owned? Are you custom art designs? Are we going to see prints that we can only get from Tania, right? If we want on brand prints, can you do that? Say that in your RFI, right? Who have you previously worked with that was similarly modeled to us? Say that. Show me your experience. Don't show me the money until I ask for it. This is a common mistake, ladies. Once I'm convinced that I really like what Tania's got to offer, from here, I'm ready for an RFQ, a request for quotation. So I'm going to go back to Tania and I'm going to say, hey, we really liked what you submitted. Talk to us about quotes. How does it work, right? Or am I buying an entire suite of 30 pieces of my choice? Is it a la carte? Tell me a little bit more about how it works, right? What is your price point? What are some different price point options for me? And then usually the RFP is where we're ready to make a move. We're looking for the best proposal. So typically at the RFQ process, I usually have enough information to understand how Tania works. But the purpose of the RFP, ladies, is because I want options. So I put the RFP out so I can get get about 30 different responses and kind of determine what is the best. I hope this is making sense. If it makes sense, tell me yes.
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 Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. And if you think this is good, put it in the chat. I'm a feedback queen. I love feedback. So let me know, ladies. Let me know that I'm right on target with what you want to know. Now let's talk about bid. And the reason I like to break this down, see, I'm the type of coach when I used to coach, I don't do it anymore, but I like to make it make sense and pick apart the differences because people often commingle these terms. And this is where we lose our money because we get confused. So I like to be super clear. So what is a bid and how is a bid different from an RFP? So let's check it out. Let's look at a bid. So a bid now is a proposal or offer from a supplier or contractor, typically in response to an RFP or an RFQ to provide the required services. So a bid is basically saying, I already submitted the RFP. They came back and said, hey, I like your proposal. I like how you're going to approach it. Now give me a formal bid or statement of work. So a bid is literally Tania's exact response. She has all the information. She now understands what they want and she's putting it on a bid and she's bidding for it. Some people use the term bid interchangeable with statement of work or RFP. And I see someone trying to get in. So give me 1 second. Let me let them in. All right, now let's go through a contract. So what is a contract though? So the bid laid out the work that you're going to do and the RFP laid out how you're going to go, and approach it. But a contract is where we start to talk about the legalese. We start to talk about KPIs. We start to talk about delivery times. We start to talk about when we get paid, right? Which I'll tell you, Gerald is going to give us a lot of good insight on contract financing in just a second. But the contract is really designed to support the legal aspect of this work. So it's a legally binding agreement between two or more parties that really outlines the T&Cs or terms and conditions under the goods and services provided. Not just what's being provided, but how will it be provided and in what terms. I'll give you a real example of when this is important, ladies. Let's say that you're working with a major corporation and they pay on a net 60. Right? That means you're not getting paid until 60 days from now. Okay. Now, it's important for us as vendors and suppliers to add in this contract that we understand that this is a net 60 pay cycle. We also should state what happens, what are your penalties that you're going to infringe upon them if they're late? What happens if it's late? Most of us are so happy to get the work, we don't even put that in, but you should. You see, there are some things you can do as a vendor supplier. You can say, if this is late, our firm, our small business suppliership charges a penalty of this, right? So you should be always looking out for yourself. Here's why it matters. A lot of this work, you may need subcontractors to deliver this work. Well, if they don't pay you on time, now you're absorbing the cost of trying to pay your subcontractors on time. Don't worry, Gerald is going to talk more about it. But here's why the contract legalese terms matter. All right, because it's not just what is being delivered, it's how and when, and what happens when things don't go as planned. What happens if you run out of supply? What happens if there's an emergency? These are all things we should be talking about. I'm going to pause here. Is there anything in the chat that I need to know about? Are there any questions that I need to be aware of? All right, we're going to keep going. All right, so now let's talk about the proposal. So a lot of these words, again, are used interchangeably. You'll hear people say the contract, you'll hear people say bid. So you have to really ask, when you say contract, are you talking about the legal piece or are you talking about putting a proposal together? You have to ask because people use these interchangeable. A proposal is really a document submitted by a supplier or contractor in response to an RFP. So the reason this is all on the screen is because these are terms that people use all the time and they commingle them. All right. Finally, let's talk about procurement and let's talk about how the supplier diversity person that you keep trying to go to is not always the decision maker. Did y'all know that the supplier diversity person doesn't have the money? Yeah, let's talk about it, you all. All right, so what is procurement, Dawn Nicole? So procurement as a process, ladies, is the process of acquiring goods, services, or work from an external source like us, right? It's typically through a competitive bidding process until it's not, okay? So again, That's why you have procurement managers and you have procurement officers. These are terms you want to get familiar with. Your procurement manager and your procurement officer is usually someone different than a supplier diversity person. Did you all realize that? Does everybody know that? No, if you just learned it today, say me. It's okay. If you just learned that today, me. Okay. So let me tell you why they're different, because this is going to help you as you seek out your corporate partnerships. A lot of us make the mistake of saying, oh, this person at Wells Fargo or Bank of America, I'm just picking on them, or NASA is in supplier diversity. I need to get buddy buddy with them. But you know who you need to get buddy buddy with? It's the procurement manager, you all. It's the procurement manager who has the need, right? Or the procurement officer, right? Because that means they are procuring services. They are literally the person in many cases that puts together the procurement order, what the requirements look like, and then they submit it out. Now, how do they work with the supplier diversity person? Typically, the supplier diversity department or team or group is making sure that we have diverse suppliers in the pipeline, but that team is not making the decision. That team is just making sure that in the procurement process, those diverse suppliers are represented or made known. So I just want to be clear, because it's a common mistake where people believe that they should be getting buddy buddy. And I'm not saying you should not, right? Because when you have a relationship with the supplier diversity person, you do want to ask questions about, what are you all focusing on this year? Is it veteran diverse suppliers? Is it women? Is it LGBT, right? Is it Latina? Like, what is the focus of your supplier, your diverse supplier initiative, right? But they are not the decision makers. They do not hold the bag, the money. Are there any questions so far before we move on? Questions or comments? Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. So let's talk about relationship-driven opportunities. This one is my favorite because 100% of all of my contracts that I've won have been through this, which is why, ladies, it's important. It's so important who you know, where you go, and what you can show. You'll always hear me say that with Queen City Women in Business. This is important because people buy from people, and they typically buy from people they know, like, and trust. And so as we think about relationships, this can be a direct relationship with someone you know, or this may be a relationship, Sharon Nixon Crenshaw, where somebody told somebody about you and how. That's why it pays to do good work, to work well, and to have a decent reputation for yourself, because people talk. Okay. So I'm going to share with you how relationship driven opportunities know, because sometimes it is about being in the know, but y'all know I'm always teaching you the competitive lens. It's also about knowing an opportunity when you see it, because I'm going to tell you a secret. A lot of these relationship driven opportunities, sometimes someone comes to you, Danita, and they say, hey, Danita, I've been looking at your work for a while. I've got diverse spend. I have a need. I'm just going to go ahead and secure your services. Sometimes it happens that way, Danita. But other times you all have to be strategically listening for an opportunity that has not been spoken. Sometimes you have to, when you're in business, right, and you're dealing with corporations, they may not always explicitly say, I need someone in compensation benefits, Danita, which is what Danita does, right? They may not say that. So you have to know people and you have to listen. I'm going to give you a real example of what happened to me. So before 2022, I was already doing small business, right? I was doing small business, even with corporations. I'd take a $10,000 project or a $14,000 training day at Anderson and all these different things. But I didn't start doing the real money until 2022. And it happened by accident, ladies. Let me tell you what happened. This is really, really important. What happened for me is I was already an independent consultant. So I was a subcontractor to a prime. Now, my Queen City Women in Business ladies knows what that is, but I'm just going to say it just in case people don't know. So the prime is the person who owns this relationship with Boston Consulting Group, was the billion-dollar company. And then the prime was doing an agile enterprise transformation, right? A lot of words. And they were looking for people who understood agile transformation on an enterprise level. And that was me and my firm back in 2022. So I got a phone call to be a subcontractor on this huge contract, right? And my job was that I would bring all my tools and systems from my company at the time, which was Agile Connects, right? I was going to bring it to the table and make the prime look good. Because really, what subcontractors do is we make those primes look good, we help them deliver. But here's what happened by accident. So while I was working as a subcontractor, the decision maker, the leader, put in a Slack message. Slack is like Teams. And she said, hey, we need some of you agile coaches to help volunteer to create a leadership training for hundreds of agile people. Guess what, ladies? About 8 people jumped in right away and said, me, oh my gosh, me, I want to do it, me, oh, sign me up. But I, with my coaching and training background, looked at that request and said, that's not free, volunteer. That's not even what we're here to do. You're really trying to get extra work out of us. I knew that that was problematic. I was the only person who did not jump to give my worth for free, but I reached out to Lynn secretly or separately and said, Lynn, I saw this request for us to help build this multi-phase training for hundreds of your leaders in Agile, internationally, by the way. Lynn, my background knows that that starts at about 35,000, because what I hear you talking about is train the trainer, an assessment, right? Building the training, the discovery. Y'all, I knew that that was worth money. The moment I went to Lynn with this question, I said, so Lynn, I guess what I'm asking is, I'm interested, but do you have a budget? Lynn said, I thought you would never ask. Yes. Make me a proposal. Ladies, in 2 weeks, I owned that work. Today, they still pay for an assessment years later because I was smart enough to build into my proposal, not just the servicing of the work. I want you to hear me, but I built in my own intellectual property that they needed to license so that when I'm gone, you're still going to pay me an annual licensing fee for my Agile assessment. Y'all better hear. I need somebody to come off mute and say, Dawn Nicole, I need somebody to feel this.
Hello.
Dawn Nicole
You did it.
Okay.
Come
That
on,
was
Dawn
awesome.
Nicole.
Is this thing on? Is this on? I'm just
Still
making
going.
sure. Okay. So what I'm saying, ladies, is you can't afford to play it small. We're not talking about small businesses here. You do not send a multi-billion-dollar company a $3,000 thing or $2,000 because that's what you used to do, because that's what you're comfortable. They will laugh at you. They will say, absolutely not. They don't know how to price. Right. So I knew that starting, and this was a starting figure. We made way more than 35. My point is, when I had the conversation in 2022, I knew that volunteering for this was all wrong. And I was the only one brave enough to have the conversation. And because I did, I owned that work. And to this day, they still pay an annual subscription for our licensing of that assessment. Now, through the work that we were able to do, this quickly turned into a second piece of work for $150,000. Now, if you think like me that that's not that much money, I want you to look at that again. We were paid $150,000 for a 3-month project. It's not bad. That's about $50,000 a month. Not bad, right? That'll do. Right? So how did this happen? I'll tell you how it happened. And I'm going to tell you, real business doesn't take all day. These are situations where we were positioned. That's why I want you to understand an opportunity when you hear it, when you see it. Don't be so quick to say yes and give your value out. Be the elephant in the room. Ask the question that they don't ask. So how do we end up with the $150,000? I will tell you. The same person who knew we could deliver came back to us, Lynn, and she said, Dawn Nicole, we have an immediate need for an Agile coach. I know your company is Agile Connects. We want to start working directly with you, subcontractor. Let's terminate your subcontracting contract. Let's do a prime position. Let's bring you in as an Agile staffing company to help us staff an Agile coach. So what did I do? I literally rinse and repeated what the same. Here's what I asked her, and this is what you all need to know. It's not about what you say, it's about asking the right questions. Remember earlier I said, do you have a budget? That's the right question. Okay. So let me tell you what I asked Lynn, because I had never done this in my life. I want y'all to hear me. So here's the right question to ask Lynn. I said, well, Lynn, with the staffing companies you use today, can you give me a maximum and a minimum? How are they pricing you today? How do they charge you? What does that cost? Lynn told me what the highest one charges and what the lowest one charges. Guess what I did? I went closer to the highest one and we won the work and delivered. So I'm telling you this because it's so important that women like us win by understanding, right? Understanding how to ask the right questions, understanding how to put ourselves in the position. Ladies, as a result, my life changed drastically. I started to do things I could never afford to do as a small business before. Money was no longer an object. I ended up on the American Cancer Society gala, speaking at Microsoft, ended up in Hawaii. Like, my life has changed. And so I want this for all of us. I want you to definitely consider corporate contracting. Now, let's talk about the RFP driven opportunity so I can leave time for my good friend Gerald Watson to talk about when you win the contract, how do you afford to pay people without going broke? How do you afford a team? Because you're going to need a team, but a team that you don't have to fund yourself or wait for your payment to come. So we're going to get to that in just a second. So let me hit this very quickly. I'll answer some questions and then Gerald, I'll turn it over to you in just a moment. So let's talk about the RFP process. The RFP process is a little bit more formal, as I described earlier. This is all about being in position to have access so that you can be notified to opportunities. But ladies, let me say it slow. If you are looking to do business with corporations, then you have to go where the corporations are sourcing and submitting their RFPs. So where do you go? I'm going to tell you. You're going to go to these things called vendor management systems. You absolutely want to take a picture of this because I'm going to tell you two things that no one ever tells you. Y'all know that's my famous line. They're not telling you this, right? You're going to want to get on these vendor management systems. Now, let me explain a little bit more. These are platforms that connect buyers to suppliers, right? And they help to manage the RFP process. So I'm going to hit this in 2 minutes so I can give Gerald his time. So systems like Range Me, who, by the way, we're a new partner with. So Queen City Women in Business and Range Me has an official partnership. And a few of you were on the call yesterday where Range Me was telling our members how to compete on their system. Okay, but there's also Coupa, Ariba, and others. Now, these may sound foreign to you, so let me quickly fast track you. There are two ways y'all need to be playing on these systems. One way is that each of you pick one. You don't need all of them. You just need one. Why, Donica? Why would you just pick Range Me? Because Range Me already has access to about 47,000 retailers. So if you're a product-based vendor and you want to sell your product to like CVS, Kroger, Walmart, Winn-Dixie, wherever, right? Target, then Range Me is the place to go. But maybe you're not a product supplier. Then you want to be on Ariba, SAP, Ariba, or Coupa, or even Supplier Gateway. So just know the first thing I want to tell you is some of these vendor management systems are very friendly for products. And then others like Supplier Gateway, Coupa, and Ariba are very friendly for services. I don't care which one you're on, but you need to be on one. But let me put you on something. You can go directly and create an account. Many of these are free. Now, why would you do that? Because when you create an account and you upload your certifications and you put your differentiators and your commodity codes and your NAICS codes, these major buyers are already doing searches trying to find you. Well, that's the hard way. So now that I told you the hard way, let me tell you a shortcut. Let me tell you something that they're not telling you. You could do it the way I just described. Or if you really want to be slick with it and fast track, instead of going directly on there, paying money in some cases to have a profile that might get hits or might not, instead, you can create your top 5 list of companies you want to work with. That's why when you started today's session with me, I asked you to put in the chat, who do you want to work with? Now, why is this important? Is because the top 5 companies you want to work with already have portals on these platforms. What that means is, Danita, if you said to me right now, Dawn Nicole, I really want to do business with Bank of America, I'm going to say, great, Danita, Google Bank of America Supplier Diversity Portal, and the link that comes up is already going to take you to Ariba or Coupa. That means you don't have to create a standalone profile. You could go directly through the companies who've already paid to be on there. So you save your money and you just put your information in their portal, which has a deeper targeted rate, right? You're targeting directly instead of hoping to be found. Tell me if does this make sense, ladies? I want to make sure I'm saying it slow. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is exactly how you want to do that. Through being on these platforms, that's how you get notified, Cassie and Yolanda, when there's a new solicitation that matches your NAICS code and your commodity code. This is how we found out that JP Morgan Chase was trying to do a big solicitation because we were on Ariba. Okay. So it's either that you're on there directly or you go directly through the company's portals so you can hit the target directly. I recommend that you save yourself some time and simply just go to the portals of the companies you want to work with that sit on these platforms so that you can get notified the next time there's an RFP solicitation. And with that, I'm going to pause to take 2 or 3 questions before I turn the floor over to Gerald Watson. Any questions for me? Or comments? Y'all are quiet today. Is there anything in the chat that I need to see?
I'll say this game-changing information.
Oh, good. Good.
I will +1 her comment. I'm quiet because I am taking notes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's great information. One of the things that I like, Don Nicole, was that go to the individual company and
Yes.
look for their platform and put it there, because what I've been doing technically is just looking for RFPs, searching for RFPs instead of going directly to that particular corporation.
Yes. Yes. That's right. Because you don't want everyone, you want the right someones. So go to the people that go right to their portal. That means you don't have to pay for it and you're automatically registered with them. So good stuff. Anyone else? One or two more.
Yeah, I'm glad you differentiated between the portals that are services versus product focused.
Yes.
So that was really good.
Thank you. That's important. Thank you. Takesha?
Yes, I had a clarity question. Number one, thank you again. Somebody told me about Range Me, but I'm mostly in service right now. So we were talking about going on the portal and putting information there. Is it just like filling out an account?
Is
that what you're talking about?
That's a good question, ladies. So, and again, I like to tell you what I do personally. So personally, I am not as a standalone on any of these portals. Instead, what I have done, Takesha, is I have targeted Capital One. And so what I like to do is target for right what I want. I've got Capital One, NFL. First, I make my list and I keep updating it, by the way, every month. I make a list and then I go and I do a Google search, or you could use our supplier BI. Takesha, we owe you that report, by the way. But anyway, do a Google search on the list that you create. And in your Google search, just type in Supplier Diversity Registration Portal, NFL, Supplier Diversity Registration Portal, Bank of America, and Kaiser, right? Wherever you want to work, Pfizer, and it will take you directly to the portal. Go sign up through those. Now that will take you about an hour. So what I used to do, ladies, when I first started is I booked out weekly, at least a few hours a week. And I was like, Dawn Nicole, you're going to dedicate this to the admin work. You're working on your business, not in your business. Right. And so I would do that. And now I would get all type of notifications from JP Morgan Chase and others to compete for RFPs.
I'm going to kind of walk through the slides that we have, and so that we can have time on the back end for questions. Okay. And since today we're talking about corporate, I'm going to focus most of my comments on that. And I'd like to first of all begin by congratulating you ladies. You have been as you go forward and apply the tools and techniques that you'll be learning from Alvarez and from Don Nicole. You have submitted bids and you have been successful in securing contracts and purchase orders. And now the next step is how to finance them. And if you haven't established a financing plan for that, we're going to talk about that today. And let me just say this, and in a nutshell, what our company does is we specialize in working with growing companies all over the country who have contracts or purchase orders, or they can get them. They can do the work, but they need financing specifically for those contracts. And I've been doing that for over 35 years. Our business is 100% referral, and certainly here to provide, not only serve as a resource, but as you have questions, as you go through the process, be more than glad to assist as a partner. And I'll tell you this, the fact is, over half of the clients that get referred to us, well over half, have won contracts but do not have a financing plan. Many of these are businesses owned by men. I'm just saying, but they haven't quite figured it out, and so we're going to talk about that. So, what is contract financing? Let's just start there. And in a nutshell, contract financing is a very customized form of financing designed to provide you with the funding that you need to perform on your contracts. What kind of funding? In some cases, it may be on the front end. You may have a contract where you require mobilization funding or startup funding for that contract. Maybe if it's a services contract, say you're in security services business, you may need money for equipment or money to open up a project office. If you're a contractor and you may need money for per diems and to cover travel expenses. Whatever front-end financing you may need, mobilization fund, that's part of it. Contract working capital, so funding you need as you go through and perform the work, whether it's a services contract where you need ongoing money for contract payrolls to pay subcontractors, or if it's a product contract where you got a PO and you need funding to pay your vendors. The third is on the back end. Once you've completed the work, and you've invoiced, it's financing to help speed up the cash flow while you wait to get paid. So who needs it? The three categories. One, companies that are growing too fast. These are companies that are in a bank. They've in good standing. They've got a credit line with the bank, but the bank tells them they're growing too fast. They're getting more and more contracts and more than what the bank can support, or the bank tells them they don't have enough collateral to support those contracts. You're growing too fast. Or maybe they're maxed out. They have an existing bank line and they've used it all up. Maybe they're paying interest only, or could be worse. They could be behind, maybe in a semi-default. They've got contracts, so they could get contracts, and if they could get the funding, they could help to turn things around. Or they're unbankable. Maybe they're a startup. Maybe they don't meet the bank's traditional lending criteria. Maybe it's a credit score issue, whatever it is. So contract financing would apply to companies in all three of these categories. So what's the difference between contract financing versus bank financing? With bank financing, the bank is looking at your creditworthiness. The contract financing lender is looking at the financial strength of your customer. So if we're talking government agencies or looked at as, or Fortune 500 companies are looked at as A-rated companies, they're looking more at their strength versus yours. Historical performance, bank tend to look backwards. So you go into a bank, they're going to ask you for your financial statements, maybe for the last 2 or 3 years. With contract financing looks forward. So repayment isn't based upon your historic ability to make payments, but based on the cash flow from the contract, which is what will support the advances. Banks also have a fixed monthly payment. Got a term loan or some such thing, they're looking for a payment every month. With contract financing, there are no payments. So you don't have daily payments, weekly payments, monthly payments. In fact, the invoice payments that come in will pay off the advances, any advances that you may have received from your lender. We use the term self-liquidating. It pays itself off. The next one, which is very important, a bank will give you, once you do get approved, if you get approved, they're going to give you a fixed loan amount or a fixed line of credit amount. You just got a new contract, you need more, you go to the bank, you say, I need an increase in my line, And the bank will tell you in most cases that subject to annual review, you got to wait another 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. Contract financing is, we use the word elastic. Elastic, what that means is that it can increase with new contract awards. So as you get more and more contracts, your financing line of credit with on the contract financing side can be increased. And here's the key thing. Key thing is that oftentimes companies will go into a bank, they got a contract, and they'll say, I got a contract, I need funding. I got a contract for $250, $1 million, or whatever it is. And here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this: a contract is just a piece of paper. In and of itself, it has no value. Value accrues through performance. And I'm going to repeat that. Value accrues through performance. So as you perform on that contract, you are creating value. So the contract itself, while the contract itself may be the asset, the collateral, which a lender is loaning against, is the actual invoice that's generated after you've done the work. But here's the problem. The problem is that many companies need help in creating the collateral. They can't create that invoice because they need money up front in order to perform, right? That's where contract financing comes in. Let's look at a couple examples. And we're going to talk about how this applies in real world situations. And we're going to talk about service companies. And to be sure, if you are in a service industry, be it technology, tech, any form of service, and these are just some examples on this list, what's your biggest need for financing is going to be for payrolls, right? In fact, payroll funding, contract payroll funding is without a doubt the number one challenge that growing companies have as they are awarded new contracts. And as they get more and more contracts, the bigger the problem. So let's look at an example of as to how this works. We have a client, which is woman-owned business. They're a tech company, info systems contractor. They work with federal agencies. They work with private companies. They got a great business. They provide people, and they invoice by the hour. Some work from home. Some work at the client site. They're in about 4 different states. They've got over 75 employees. They bill by the hour to the agency, and they got payroll every week. Challenge is that they only invoice once a month. So by the time they invoice, they've already had 3 payrolls. Factoring, for those of you who are familiar with factoring or receivable financing, is not an option because there's no invoice yet. There is no asset, okay, or collateral to loan against. So what's needed is funding before you invoice. And so what contract payroll funding does, it provides advances on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, tied to your payroll schedule to provide the funding you need to cover your payrolls to perform on that contract. Okay. This particular company get very strong gross margins. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. What's the cost? Typically, the cost for contract payroll funding is within the 1% to 2% per month range. So as you can see, it's, the financing costs really aren't bad. Okay. The second biggest area that we have clients that need funding for is for supply contracts. Supply contracts is where you're doing business with a let's look at the list. It could be a Walmart, it could be Lowe's, it could be it could be Johnson & Johnson, it could be Nike, it could be any of those organizations and others where you have a contract to provide a physical product. They issue you a PO, and now you've got to go out and you got to pay your vendors.
We have 5 minutes left, Gerald. 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. And you got to pay your vendors. Just as an example of that, what contract financing does on the vendor trade credit, it provides you with financing to cover your suppliers upfront as needed, or some form of a payment guarantee in order to make sure that your suppliers are covered. Third thing we're going to touch on is is for construction contracts. You've got the two biggest expenses that contractors have are to pay their vendors and to pay their subs. What we do here, what we look at here is we've got a client, women-owned business, they're a contractor, and we set up a revolving line of credit based on their receivables that they can draw on as needed as they invoice on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. I've got next we've got some 10 things you must know. I'm going to touch through these real quick. If request day one invoicing, mobilization, submit where you can, when you start your work, you can submit a mobilization invoice, get funding right from the start. Bill your financing costs into your bids. Request invoicing for stored materials. We can talk later about what that means. Maximize your gross profit. We'll skip number 5 since today we're talking corporate. Number 6, find out how you get paid. Very important thing, especially when you're working with corporate. And if you're working with major corporations, they're going to have a vendor agreement. There's some issues there that we can talk about at a future date. Maximize invoicing frequency, how often you invoice, and request fast pay terms. Again, if you're selling to corporate and you got a PO, you want to be able to do partial invoicing and partial shipment. Set aside and negotiate contracts, which is exactly what Don and Nicole was talking about. Negotiated, not traditional approach. And last but not least, establish a game plan for financing early and upfront. Okay.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I put you on the fast track there, Gerald. You ended quicker than okay. First of all, can I just personally give one takeaway that you said that blew my mind? I love the idea of building in the cost of the contract financing into the bid that you just said. I think you said we could build the cost, and I had no idea. That's ingenious.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. Money is, think of money this way. Money is a material.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So, and every material has a cost. So you want to always build that in. The other way to think about it is with contract financing, you are essentially renting money on a daily basis. Okay. And you're only paying for the actual amount of time that money's outstanding. A few days ago, I had a trip to Boston. I was there for 3 days, and as it wound up, I needed a car. Okay. So I rented a car. Cost me $40 a day. Really not that bad a rate, right? $40 a day. We take 40 multiplied times 30 days, that's $1,200, right?
That's right.
$1,200 for the month. Well, I don't need it. So it's cheaper to buy a car because I could finance it over 3 or 4 years, and maybe those payments will go down to $200 a month versus $1,200. But I only need it for 3 days, right?
Right.
So it's cheaper to rent that car versus buying it. $40 a day is a good value. Money works the same way.
Love it. Very good point. Okay, I want to hear from so this was awesome, by the way. I loved your part. And you're coming back tomorrow to talk about contract financing specific to local and state. And then you're coming back Friday to talk about it specific to federal government, which we can't wait to hear. So ladies, what questions do you have? What were some questions you all wanted to ask or things you wanted to know that we did not get a chance to cover? We have time for 2 or 3 questions from you all. Any questions? Any comments? Angel, hey there.
Yeah, I'm finally stable. Okay, so my question is, I attended a presentation over the summer through a small business organization that I was part of, training small business owners, and they did not talk about contract financing at all. So this is brand new concept. I find that that's interesting that was lacking from that training. But they did talk extensively about a line of credit through a bank. So they really leaned heavily on building a relationship with your banker so that you can have a line of credit for your business in the event you get a contract and you need some cushion. What would you recommend in terms of the steps that we would go to research which avenue is best for us in our company?
Okay, good question. And I'll tell you this, about 30, our business is 100% referral. About 30% of it comes from banks. The reasons banks make referrals to us is because as I stated earlier, number one, banks have one is time. Okay, the time it takes to submit all the documents and go through the approval process with the bank. It could take whatever it takes, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe longer. And then the approval process and criteria is going to be a lot more stringent. But here's the key. What's more important than that is as you're growing and as you're becoming more and more successful and bidding on jobs and acquiring new contracts, you can't go back to the bank and say, look, I just got a new contract. I need to increase my line of credit. Okay. So the bank's going to tie your line, the size of your line, based upon what you're eligible for. From a collateral point of view, contract financing is just the opposite. The contract is the asset. So the more and more contracts you have, the larger a line you can get. Is bank financing a good idea? It's a great idea for certain for paying day-to-day operating expenses, things of that nature. But for growth purposes, there's two things that banks two sources that are not good. One is banks, and the other is equity. Because equity is the most expensive form of financing, because as you grow, if you're giving away more and more shares of your business, after a while, it'll be like, as we see sometimes on Shark Tank, right? You're giving away too much than what you should.
That's
I have a
good.
question.
Who is that?
This is Tashara.
Hey, Tashara, please ask your
Hello there,
question.
Mr. Watson. You mentioned many things about startup companies and those who will be able to get the capital needed to move forward and build out their business and that foundation. Let's say this is a fast-paced growing company and now you need to acquire staff and things of that nature. Is there a time frame set on the capital that's provided for you to be able to build out the structure and foundation of the organization, opposed to the revenue side that will be coming in?
Well, I'll tell you, and that's a good question. At the end of the day, when we're looking at and when lenders are looking at at you as a candidate for financing, well, let me just say this: we work with startups all the time. Okay, quite often, a startup won't have all the infrastructure in place. They won't always have all the accounting systems in place. They won't always have all the business systems and infrastructure in place that are going to be needed right out the gate. Okay. Those are situations that we can work with. What we look at actually is we look at where you're at, and we look at your potential, and then we try and connect the dots between where you're at, where you're going, and get financing in place that can continue increase to support that growth. Does that answer your question?
It does. It actually makes it a little bit more convenient, and it gives you the confidence to move forward because there is a plan in place to help you excel and scale up without having to worry about how to be able to maximize on the capital you have without those systems in place. So that's very great information. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Awesome. And as we're at time, just very quickly, ladies, if you look at the chat, I've put Gerald's information, so just copy and paste that. And if you are looking at becoming a member, which we hope you do, so there's also QCWIB.com. More tomorrow, same time, same channel. And I hope this was helpful. If it was, let's clap it up for Gerald, ladies, if we got something out of this. Thank you. Sending you QCWIB love, Gerald. So, all right. See you tomorrow, ladies. Take care. Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.